in the door, everybody's kind of like, ooh, somebody new. And it's like, but we talked to everybody, met everybody, and met the pastor, Pastor Conrad, and Conrad, yeah, Pastor Conrad, I said that, and so met him and talked with him. Had a great time. Ended up staying late. We were some of the last ones to leave. We ended up talking with everybody there, and it was just so neat to be in another little church that was almost identical to ours. That while we were someplace else, and when you get between Houston, Texas, and up near, in the mountains, in the Sawtooth Mountains in Idaho, it doesn't get much different than that. We're flat, hot, humid. They're cool, dry, and up at altitude. Mountains everywhere. I mean, it was really pretty and neat to see. They're out in shorts between us, but it was the same. It was so neat to be in a little tiny church like that with people like that really had the exact same attitude. Hey, we're here to disciple people. We're here to help people grow. The pastor was telling us how he gets on the bus every now and then. There's a bus that kind of goes resorty. It's the public transportation, but it always has this weird mix of people using public transportation to get to work and people using it to get from one ski area to another ski area. And so it's a really different blend of people and everything that's in their church. But it was so much the same attitude as what we have. Part of what we're going to talk about, one of the things that happened up there while we were there, we were picking a church to go to, and I really recommend it to y'all. If you're out of town, there is nothing better than picking a church when you're on vacation and going there and just enjoying the church service and just being there with other people. Even if you don't know what it's going to be like, go to any kind of church just so you get that extra experience and a chance to take that, find out what they're doing, what you're enjoying, the parts where you were blessed, and bring it back to our church. Because we all help each other, the body of Christ. This was the body of Christ up in Idaho, and we're down in the southern part of Texas. And we were all sharing and being with each other. So, I mean, that part of it is really neat to see. But one of the things that was there is we were there, and there was another church, a bigger, more established traditional church, and they had all their rainbow flag stuff out. We are a welcoming community church. We welcome everybody. And so there's the sign out, there's the flag out. I don't know about y'all, but when I see a flag out, when I see somebody's got a Dallas Cowboys flag out in their front yard on a Sunday, they're not telling me they want me in there as a Houston Texans fan. They're telling me that they want more Dallas Cowboys fans. They want more people giving them a thumbs up instead of a thumbs down as we drive by. It's that's the point to flags, is to set off who you are. So to tell you everybody's welcoming, but to go ahead and put in something that we know those of us with traditional Sunday morning service to get recharged and relifted and elevated, where that's part of why we're coming, and that's part of what that cross out there on the church is showing. When we were in Utah, that's part of Moroni, the angel that's over all of the Mormon temples. And I still will call it Mormon. They don't want to use that word anymore. They want to use Church of LDS. Yeah, Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ. They want to put Jesus Christ in there. It's a polytheistic religion. It is not a monotheistic religion, monotheist religion. And so it's not just a few gods. They have thousands and thousands, millions and millions of gods. Why? Because you become a god, and you get your own planet and your own world, and you get all this stuff that you get to be a god over, just like God, the great I am. And that's what they teach. But they're these later-day saints. They've had a revelation later. So we were down in Salt Lake City, and we got to see their big main temple and their headquarters. And you see this, and you start realizing, hey, they're glomming on. They're adding something on there. They're putting Jesus Christ in there because there's a draw with that. There's an acceptance that comes with that. And that's one of those things that's what cults, that's what they typically want to do. Well, we've got another cult that's coming on. Not only do you have the little Thatcher Moroni was one of the angels that called people, and it's a key figure. So that little Moroni standing up there on top of each one of the temples, you can see a church that looks very much like a traditional country Baptist church we're used to seeing. You'll see that, standing off, and oh, that's a Mormon church. Or now it's an LDS church. Or it says the LDS, and then it says of Jesus Christ on the bottom, as we saw one. So that's one of those things, as if they're putting it on out, but Jesus Christ was to put us right and make us right with the one true God, the one and only, the great I am, Abba, our Father. That's who he was to make you, not to make you capable to go past where that person was at, meaning you can become a God just like that God, just like in Adam and Eve. Martin is going to read, coming up here in just a sec, from the first part of Genesis. part of why I'm having to read that, and part of what I wanted you all to see, is after seeing these things of people are constantly wanting to glom onto the church and put something on it that it's not supposed to have. Their point of view, their sins, their lusts are what they're going to want to start to put onto the church. When they start to want to put this onto the church, you start seeing things change in society, because our Protestant work ethic, the Christian idea of all life is worthy of paying attention to, all life is valuable. Why? Because it's made in the image of God. Martha's going to read that part where we're created, men and women, in the image of God. As that's coming up, why is that coming up? Hey, Pride Month has started. Has everybody heard of that? You ever heard of that? You ever seen it on the news? You seen it in your grocery store ads? You seen it on some of your favorite NFL teams, with showing off what their pride colors are? I mean, has anybody seen any of that? Am I the only one who's seen some of that stuff going? It's everywhere. And everybody's pushing it. And now it's no longer Pride Day, and then it was Pride Week. And those of us who are old enough know it is. It started in June with a big revolt in New York City, where New York City was closing down a particular nightclub. And in that particular nightclub, they started busting them because sodomy was against the law. Homosexual sex was against the law. It was one of those things that wasn't allowed. It comes from the idea of Sodom and Gomorrah, of the men that wanted to have their way with the angels, the men that come along. So that this gets carried, and was part of our society to say, hey, this kind of behavior is wrong. But they came along, and like so many times, and this is fair, the strong hand and the strong arm of judgment, the same, but we're also cautioned about in this Bible not to be judgmental, not to look at people and just decide they aren't worthy. I love that with what Nina was saying today. I mean, I finally had to just sit down and take it in, is what Nina was saying about this thing about what about loving those people who are unlovable, those people who are different, those people who reach out and are different. That's also our calling. So we have this thing that's coming up, this Pride Month that's coming up, where it's going to be put before us. How much more obvious does it get to anybody? One of the things, and where I have Martha stopping in her reading of Genesis, as she's stopping after Satan, after the serpent deceives the man and woman into believing that they can be like God. And they too can just be just like God. We saw that in the Mormon faith. You too can be just like God. How much more obvious does it get? They tell their people one of the holy books is the King James Bible. But apparently nobody reads it, because it says it right in there in the front. Part of the fall is, as you fall, it's the reason you fall is you can be just like God, and you can decide what is good and evil, what is right and what's wrong. If you decide this about your sexuality, if you decide about who you're going to be, God has a plan. He creates man and women to be an example of who he is. And it's why it's an atrocity. Why is this kind of behavior unacceptable? This kind of behavior is unacceptable because it goes at the very core of the identity of who God is. God is manifest in us being man and wife. We're complementary. We complement each other. This complementary nature that we have as we come together and as we're around is one of those things where we actually get to see that nature of God that is difficult for us to fathom. It's kind of easy to fathom a loving mother. It's easy to see a picture of Mary with the baby Jesus and understand that she loved Jesus. She understood the burden he was going to be going through, and she loved him. And she was broken really hard about seeing her baby destroyed this way. But that's not the only nature it is. You then also have God the Father. You also have that father image of a strong father that has rules and judgment and says, this is the best way to live. Not a weak father. I mean, who wants a weak father that says to his kid, well, you decide what's best for you. You decide what church the family's going to go to. You like the one with the big playground? Okay, that's the one we're going to go to. What if the one with the big playground is the one that has the angel Moroni over the top? What if it's the one that has the flag out front? What if your kids see the bright colors and love the idea of the rainbow flag, and instead of being taught that it's the covenant relationship with Noah that says, I will never kill you all off again, no matter how bad you are. And somebody takes this idea that God's saying, I recognize how horrible you are, and I'm never going to wipe the world again from it. I'm going to send my Messiah. I'm going to send my son, just like it did before, to die and be saved for you so you can come back and you can resist and you'll fight these temptations along with the Holy Spirit that I'm going to send you. So you have all these things that you're being given and these things you're being told and that you're being taught by a strong father. There's lots of strong fathers in this building. There's lots of strong men who understand they need to step up and they need to lead. We have Father's Day coming up. That's a great time to appreciate our fathers. It's a great time to appreciate our strong fathers, and it's a great time to help build up our weak fathers. The ones who don't really know what their calling is, doesn't know what their purpose, and have been beaten down over time. And have been beaten down by this idea that this strong man that comes along and says, no, this is wrong and this is right. This person isn't there and this person isn't available. This person is going to pull himself back both either intentionally or from how he was raised, how he was brought up, and he's going to be weak. These are the things that we don't want to have happen. We got to see this. We were debating going over to this other church to see. I said, Martha, we need to be a light. And Martha's just like, yeah, okay, but I'm going to say whatever I want to say. And I said, well, that's fine. That's part of being a light. And then just it was one of those things. It's like, what is the solution? Stop and pray about it. Because to me, it was a curiosity to see how the church can do this. How can a church start deciding that the thing that they're going to put out the most is somebody who has accepted a sexually deviant behavior and decided it's going to be how they identify themselves as? We're all sinners. We're all fallen. All of us come up short. But one of the differences and one of the ways you know you're a Christian, and Kenny and I started talking about this right before we went on our trip in our discipling program, where we're talking back and forth on a more intentional level of how we're going to disciple, I've been in the faith a lot longer. I don't know everything. One thing you find as you're in the faith longer and longer is you know less and less. It's not so much that you're not picking up on it, it's that you start understanding how big God is, and you start understanding how complex and diverse he is, and how much understanding God is going to be not only a lifetime, but our next lifetime. And in the next lifetime, we do it without sin and evil. The next lifetime, we really start to get to understand God and know who he is and understand his compassion. And as we start to understand his compassion and his love for us, we understand why he gives us laws and rules. He did that in the Old Testament so that we would know what is wrong, we would know what is right, and we would do our best to follow those rules, understanding that we're living in a fallen world where we have not only our flesh and our evil that's inside of us, our selfish desires, our pride. That's what's inside us. All of a sudden, we have things that we believe in, pride that we have in certain things. And what is pride really? It's raising up. It's putting our self-esteem at a higher level than it should be at. When we esteem ourselves or our thoughts above where we really should be. Where those points where we really should be are laid out for us in the Bible. It's also laid out in our heart and our consciousness. So even before the Bible was laid out, and I'm going to do this a little bit different, Martha's going to read at the end, so that you just see it for yourself, and you get an idea of what the design is, and you can carry that. And you as a dad can teach this. You as a mom can start to embrace this and start to love on your kids in a different way, in an intentional way. And you can start to bring up and start to demand the kind of things that lead to a good life. These things, these rules, what we were starting to see, when we see this in a church that is presenting itself, either one is that is a cult, which we got to see very prominent, or one that's just lost its way and is now a false teaching, where they're saying this is an acceptable way to be. Marriage is between a man and a woman. It's that easy. There's no such thing as a same-sex marriage. It just doesn't exist. It has all sorts of proof, too, that if you want to understand it, it doesn't exist. Now, the civil union thing and all that stuff, that's not in the Bible. That's not discussed in there. There are things that you could do and you can decide on. I don't know. It doesn't affect me. History has settled this. History has settled. There's things we may debate about and we wonder what if, what if, what if. But in reality, a lot of our what if questions really are, hopefully, at best, good mental exercises so that we understand our state where we're at right now. Or, at worst, we could sit there and say, well, I don't think it should be this way. Well, history's kind of settled it. This is what it's been for thousands of years. This is what marriage has been. And what happens? It's self-perpetuating. It perpetuates itself. It blesses itself. You'll hear this when Martha's doing this going over in Genesis. And it was good, and God blessed them. He blessed them and told them to go out and be fruitful and multiply. This is what leads to the next generation. This is what brings more children into God's kingdom, is the man and the woman. Coming together as equals, but different. Because we can't really justify that man and woman nature of God in one person. God is just too complex and it's too deep, so God has two people, and it's our chance to see it. And when a mom is doing her proper part and then releasing that child over to the dad, and releasing the dad to then understand how to bring them up in the right way, but that dad also understands how to keep what mom has got in the family there, how to not be a harsh father, how not to be a harsh judge. So we start to see that, and we start to understand that about God's nature. So as we see it in these other churches, as we got to see in these last few weeks, it can really go bad. But it's so simple. Pride is a problem. Pride is the original sin. Pride is the original sin because it's the one that Satan took. Satan decided that he wasn't going to follow God's ways, that he wanted to be like God. He wanted to rule. He wanted that. He was worthy of it. It says to us in the Bible, it talks about Satan gets this thought because he was the best of the bunch. Of the angels, he was the most powerful. He was the most beautiful to look upon. He's the one that had the most talent. He's the one that had the ability of music, so singing and playing instruments. All of this was given over to Satan. And then he was given this to help bring this to the world. And he started looking around and started seeing that he had these special gifts. And what happens so often, we see it throughout the entire Bible, prosperity leads to destruction, because once we get all this prosperity, we don't think we need God anymore. In fact, we think we can do better than God would do. God tells us, here's what the ideal is. This is the ideal, a man and a woman to be married. Just one man, one woman. We have stories in the Bible where we had polygamy, where men had multiple wives. We've had stories about infidelity. But God made it very, very clear from the beginning. This is what we're supposed to do. This is what the man and the woman is supposed to be doing. And this is what it'll yield. Blessings, fulfillment. It'll yield this. It won't end in death. It won't end in the extinction of the population. It won't end in all this. This is what brings around the continuing life and how I want to do this and bring my children into heaven. And this is what we'll start to see. What we're all going to do this month, I think the first thing is this Pride Month and all this starts to come over the church. The church cannot relinquish its stance. It's not going to, we're not going to change everybody's mind. Everybody's not going to come around. We're not going to go and witness to people